Welcome to Stack Sessions. I'm Jeff Keyes, Field CTO here at All Stacks, and this is where we explore the intersection of software engineering and business strategy, particularly how AI is transforming development teams and engineering leadership. Each episode, I sit down with engineering leaders, investors, practitioners who are navigating the real challenges of building and scaling software teams in this AI era. We go beyond the hype to talk about what's actually working, what's messy, and what it means to lead engineering organizations when the fundamentals keep shifting underneath us. Today, I'm joined by Trevor Herr, the Director of Engineering Applications at Syndio. Trevor, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here because you're kind of living it. But before we dive into all this stuff, who is Trevor Herr and what do you do at Syndio?
Yeah, so I'm an engineer at heart. I spent roughly half my career as an engineer just coding, building desktop apps, web apps, mobile apps. I still code to this day, even mostly in my free time, a little bit at work when I can, especially with some of the exciting new tools that we have today that kind of gives me that opportunity to do that in my role in a way I couldn't before. So, but yeah, I moved into people leadership. And as you mentioned today, I'm director of engineering at Syndio. I've been there for just a little bit over a year, getting pretty close to a year and a half now. Based out of Calgary, Canada, I'm actually helping build out the engineering team here in Calgary. Syndio is a remote first company, but we try to hire in hub cities so we can facilitate, some in-person time, get some working sessions, and just try to bring people together more often.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is really great. It's just like in that remote first world, you lose that. And, we're probably losing it a little bit more with some of the technology and everything. But just having that in-person time is, it just goes a long way, even if it is just once a week or once a month, or if you just have the offsite or something like that. Yeah, it definitely goes a long way. My team's focus on pretty much anything that is a customer-facing application or service that pretty much encompasses all of our web applications. And then we also build apps for other enterprise applications. So the head of a headless architecture, I guess you could consider it.
You're responsible for a lot of things. I'm just going to dive right in. What an interesting time you've been through with Syndio now that you've been there for, a year and a half or some time. I mean, everything is changing around software development, and I love the fact that you're still in. I remember in our prep call, you called last year sort of the year of agentic development, where AI shifted from being assistants to agents actually doing work. You also said that the tools for measuring AI impact just isn't there yet. So kind of walk through this journey of what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking about it going into our conversation, just kind of reflecting over like the journey I went through last year. And I thought about back to when I just started at Syndio and what we were focused on at the time and what the tooling was like. And there was no discussion at that time about anything agentic, really. It was just, we have these AI tools. We're still figuring them out pretty much, right? We're not sure if they're quite there yet or anything like that. And I'm not quite sure the full timeline. I didn't go look at the history and everything, but again, just kind of think about my timeline and what tools kind of came to me at certain times throughout the year. I do think Claude Code came out at the beginning of the year. So
that's epic too.
Yeah. So that was definitely like one of the big agentic type tools that really drove things. But anyways, like it was just not really a thing a lot of people were thinking about at the time, right? It was again, like these tools are kind of like glorified search tools. They can help you do some refactoring. They're great at writing tests, but they a lot of times screw up. They don't follow your coding conventions. There was just a numerous number of things about them that it was just, they weren't quite there yet. But then like last year, just so much happened when you reflect of how the entire year went and these tools and the way they progressed. Because we went from at the beginning of the year, again, I'm pretty sure Claude Code was the first one or one of the first ones. And now like everyone has a CLI. Everyone has a composer or agent tool or something that you could run in the web or in the background or in your workflows. So it was just like, when you think about like, I cannot ever recall a time personally, a year where so much changed in engineering in my career. Now I've been in this time where you pretty much manage code and, that was kind of the era I was in. And that was I went into that era and it refined over time. And languages got better, tooling got better, frameworks got better, everything got easier, open source became a thing. So yeah, I guess probably maybe even like that big shift to open source, but that happened over such a long time. Yeah, I'm really struggling to find a time where just the tools evolve so much that really the perception of like these are just tools with potential to tools that we can actually use in our day to day.
That's really true. And I think what makes your journey really interesting is the fact that not only are you in this yourself, you have responsibilities for building stuff, but you're also leading. Remember one of the things you said to me while we were prep is you said, hey, I want to code forever. And then all of a sudden here we are, right?
Yeah.
Just taking a right turn from where we were for a second. We're going to come back to that. But what changed your mind to go into engineering leadership and engineering management?
Yeah, totally. Cause yeah, you're right. Like that was always like, I just imagined that I was always going to just be an engineer building stuff. And it was even funny was that when I moved into like a real serious leadership role, I even remember my parents saying like, are you sure you want this? Cause you always said you like to code. You just code. All you ever did was
That's not
code.
what
And
you said. You said
yeah,
engineering management is overhead. I'm sure that's what you said.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was part of a company that went through a lot of growth in a short period of time, and in that growth, we were growing, we're hiring, and so I got the opportunity to do some of that, play a part in some of that. So I decided to take on a manager role because I knew it wasn't like a manager role. It's so different in so many different companies. A lot of people have different opinions on what an engineering manager should be. I knew at the place I was at, it was going to be very much a hands-on engineering role. Like I
Right.
was still going to pretty much be an engineer, but I was going to have some people that, again, I was going to start bringing them along with me, start like teaching them and mentoring them and that kind of stuff. So it wasn't that big of a deal to me, like going into this leadership role.
Right.
And I wanted to, another big thing too, that something in my career that I didn't have a lot of was like, I really wanted to surround myself with a lot of really smart people. And this was my opportunity because the company was really starting to grow. So I wanted to be involved in the hiring process because I wanted to find people that I could learn from myself. So I think that was like one of the big parts of it too, was like, I wanted to be more involved in some of the decision making and having a little bit more say in the direction, and then helping build the team and bringing in other skill sets that, complement my own, complement the team. So yeah, I kind of went on that approach. And at some point we decided that we wanted to modernize one of our web applications. It was the year of the spa, another big year, single page applications. So we wanted to build one of those backed by a service-based API. So the only thing was that the team at the time, at this point we had grown a bit. We had hired people, like we were mostly a Microsoft.NET shop. So there was a lot of like, we were building stuff, your typical server side applications, and no one really knew React that much. I had some experience with it. I had been learning it. I just, as a technologist, always wanting to learn what the hype is about all these different frameworks and that kind of stuff, and trying them all out and that kind of stuff. So I had some experience with React and just architect. I've always kind of prided myself in architecting and trying to architect as much as I could in my roles. So this was just a great opportunity to kind of be an architect and kind of do this with a team. So we all got together. We all planned it out together. I led it, and we worked through learning and how we were going to structure the code. And we basically spent like I remember it was like, we all went into a boardroom. We spent like 3-4 days just hammering this out. It was awesome. It was such a great time. Obviously, I'm reflecting on it right now. I'm bringing in pizza and we're all just learning. So anyways, we got to that point where I said like, all right, like I'll be here to support, provide guidance or anything, but I want the rest of you to run with what we started, right? We have a framework. We built it together. All of you know it. And at that point, they went off and they built a whole bunch of features, moved over a bunch of pages, and the reception was it was awesome. Like people had this very responsive web application. It was very modern. It didn't have a lot of the problems that the older tech had. And I just had the satisfaction that it was the same satisfaction, if not better, than thinking about the first time I delivered a killer feature and everyone was like, oh, this is great. This is going to help us so much. The customers are going to love this. It's going to help us get sales. Getting that again, but at this higher level, it was just very gratifying. And it kind of drove my career from that point.
It's probably how you're a closet engineering leader or engineering manager is some of the summary things that I would take away as sound bites, right? Like you start looking at people and you're like, should they really work at this company? Or they're not that smart. You're opinionated about the process. These are things you didn't say, but I'm
Yeah.
just picking up on them, right? You want to direct pivot into a new way. You've already been an architect. You can kind of play that role and you like working with smart people. There's a challenge of getting the team moving forward. There's a lot to that in terms of the desire. And there's another aspect you didn't mention, but you hinted at, which is the mentoring of the team itself and bringing other people along and the satisfaction you get beyond just solving individual problems.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like I have one engineer that I've worked with quite a long time through my career, and I was a mentor to him, and he's one of my leaders on my team today, and just seeing his growth has provided a lot of satisfaction to me. And now I look to him for solutions and problems
Right.
when back in the day it was the reverse, and now
Right.
I'm relying
Like,
on
dude,
him, and
figure
I'm
this
like,
out.
yeah. So it's a great feeling. It
It
really
is.
is. Even though like you got to give up a little bit of your own. The best way to put it is I had an old leader. He used this phrase, and I think he got it from somewhere else, so I can't properly credit it, but giving up your Legos,
Yeah.
right? You have to
Mhm.
give up some of them, and you
Mhm.
got to let someone else do the building. Like
Yep.
you can't do it all yourself, right? And
It's
yeah,
spot
just having
on.
that realization.
And there's more satisfaction in having, frankly, for me as well, having a team move on, helping them feel that success. There's something really gratifying about knowing, hey, I was an influence and elevating this person to another level.
Hmm.
So with that sort of bent, I'm sure this resonates with every single person that's been an engineering leader, because that's why you become an engineering leader, unless you're forced into it, in which case don't do it. If this doesn't resonate with you, you're in the wrong role. Go back, be an architect or a principal dev
Exactly.
leader or a principal dev and go from there.
Yeah.
Uh, Let me just state the headline: 2024 to 2025, and 2025 in the whole year. That's pretty much the year everything changed.
Yeah.
You're
Absolutely.
in, you're doing this world and everything was great. You're helping people along. You're working with smart people. Year of agentic development. When did you realize that this wasn't just, another tool release, and about how'd you go about this journey knowing that the Legos weren't necessarily yours anymore?
Yeah, I think where it kind of clicked, where this was like this transformative year was when the agent modes started coming out. No doubt, I think like most people, that's when they got started to get excited, is because I still remember the first time I saw an agent fix. So basically, it changed some code, but it
Uh-huh.
generated an error. Specifically, it was just a linting error actually, and it recognized, like it read it from my console or whatever at the time, and it just addressed it, right? And
Mm.
that was the very first time where I just saw that interaction where it did its work, and then it said like, wait, I see there's an error, or I see there's a linter error, and then it went and fixed that linter error, and I was like, whoa, like, okay, that was pretty cool, right? Up to this point, it was always just like you were typically just generating like chunks of code in this specific file, or again, highlighting a piece of code and saying refactor this for me, or build some tests or whatever. But
Right.
to have like this thing actually iterate and see it iterate in some of a smart way, right? Like it's looking at my errors, it's looking at my linting, right? And I think the biggest thing is that by the end of the year, we have some understanding of how to work with the tools. I don't want to say we figured them out, because I don't think we have, and I don't think we're close, but I think it was like we learned how to work with it. And I think that was the biggest realization for me, because when the agents came out, it started to look like the tides where a lot of people were like, okay, now you can just one shot something. You could just go fix that bug. You
Right.
could just go build that. Just tell it to go do it. I still remember Microsoft's conference in May when they released the agent that in GitHub, where it can just go and fix an issue and
Right. Just
generate a pull
assign it to
request.
Copilot and it's all going to be great, right?
Yeah.
Woo!
And sure, maybe that can work for something very simple, a localization error, or who knows, whatever, right? But when you actually want to do some real work or work with something that is more complex, it's working with it that is the key, right? It's
Mhm.
Because the way these tools work, the way LLMs work is they're giving you the most common answer. They're giving you the average, right? Which is not always the best. And that's when you got to keep working with it because no, this is not performant enough. So like what are more performance solutions, and again, just iterating through that, just understanding what is generating and then working through it. And again, I know like a lot of people hate it when you kind of say it like this, but it is like working with an engineer to a degree. Like, yes,
Right.
it's not a person, but you are having a conversation with this agent. You're telling it to go do some work. It's coming back with some work. You're reviewing the work. You're giving it feedback. It's going back. I did that throughout my career so much with people, right?
Right.
Mentoring people, like again, giving them a task, having them go and do it, reviewing it, right? And it's not different. But the biggest realization is that with this pattern, you were able to get to a point where you had something that you could ship to production.
Exactly.
And, again, it's like with all the caveats around it, making sure you do your due diligence, the security and all that aspect of it. But it is like these tools can do it. They can complete tasks now.
Well, and
And
the whole
that
point
was it.
isn't to expect that you're going to get it right in one shot. That's the challenge with the interaction, is that so much of this is you put in a portion of a thought that may not be completely as well formed as it could be. It may not have all the context. I My best analogy is thinking about how I write now. I used to split some writing I did when I would do public facing articles. I would work with a ghostwriter. And so I would lay out a concept and go through a flow. We'd have like an hour long session of just spitballing and stream of consciousness out, because that's kind of how I think. And then organize those thoughts down into something they would write. We'd go back and iterate back and forth on it. I don't think that model's really changed. I was looking at GitHub Copilot acceptance rates. They're still targeting 25% acceptance rates, which means it's not that what's being produced is bad. It's not refined in the context that you're looking for, and it can't adapt. So I don't know. Have you had any skeptics in your team like, this stuff isn't working as well as I'd like to? And what are you telling them?
I would be shocked if there was any engineering team that didn't have some skeptics. Obviously, AI is very polarizing.
Yep.
But again, the tools for the longest while were rough, right? What was being generated was usually just not always good enough. There was always
Right.
something wrong. There was always like maybe a security vulnerability or whatever. But again, going back into this flow of working with them. And just one thing I wanted to add on that I was thinking when we're talking, that I think is another great analogy that you're talking about. So it's like if you have that junior engineer and you have crappy documentation,
Right.
they don't know
Yep.
where to start and you're going to spend more time with them, right? But with an agent, you provided really good context, really
Mhm.
good documentation. It is able to execute on the task better.
Uh-huh.
So just kind of another, just align with that again. But when it comes to like engineers being skeptical or not thinking that the tools are not working for them, I think like that is their experience, right? Like they've
Yeah.
had some bad experiences there, I
Yep.
believe. It didn't come from nowhere. I mean, no doubt again, there is some people that AI is polarizing, some people that ethics and all that kind of stuff around it, they just don't want to use it. But when you're actually using it, it's your experience, and it's just like just kind of like as a leader, you provide guidance to your team.
Right.
And I don't feel like it's any different here. And it's just like the way you provide guidance is you ask good questions, you
Mhm.
challenge them in good ways. And I think like that is the same way to do it. So I've had some success with that of again, like hey, just try this out. Just see if you can do this. But I think one really big thing is that you need to unlock your team as much as possible.
Mm.
Because if you give them the tools, you give them the space. One thing I remember that kind of stood out for me was one of my engineering managers came to me and we were kind of talking about some of the AI tooling. And I said, yeah, it'd be great if someone tried this one out. It looked good. I don't remember what it was at the time. But his response was that some of the engineers, like, they don't feel like they have enough time to work with the tool.
Right.
And,
They
and
got
my,
these deadlines, man. I
yeah.
can't work on that new stuff. I mean,
and, and I remember thinking at the time, I'm like, what do you mean they need some time? I'm like, just use it. You're doing the work today. Just go in there, try the tool, see if you can complete that task, solve this problem. But now as the year went on, it became very clear to me. And I think that's also another thing too, is like, you have to you have to be realistic. And something I always try to do is be very relatable with the team.
Right.
Like I try to use these things again on my free time. I want to get my own experience. I want to understand where I see them flop as well. So I can understand like how maybe I got past it or what ways are you going to get past it. And just again, the more experience and the more data, the feedback you get, it's just challenge them, asking the right questions, like working with that tooling. As we saw as the year went on, I think this is the equivalent of like when you join a company as an engineer, you have all your tools. This is our tech stack. This is the things we use. Here's the whole environment. This is how we set it up. This is now another piece to that, right? It's not just purely agent, but even if you're just using an agent to do development, you have to set up that environment for that agent, getting that context, having the right tooling built around it. There's just a lot of pieces to it. So like that, having MCP servers, be able to pull your documentation, ticketing information, all that kind of stuff. And then one of the big things is like having it very collaborative with your team is a big part of it too, because if your team's not collaborative with these tools, everyone's going to fumble over a lot of the same stuff and it's not going to get solved. Well, for example, one thing I saw very early on is that I tried to use the tools in a service-based architecture and it got fumbled up because of the way that code base was structured. And it was kind of structured that each service, it was a service base with service based calls, but it also provided a package to make those service calls for that service. And that package is like a reference. And so anyways, long story short was the AI agent was not making a proper service call. It was just adding functions into the package and calling them directly. And of course you would get errors because the service wouldn't be set up properly and everything. And it's such an easy thing to solve because you just tell it how your code base is structured, how
Right.
it works. And if
Asking
every
the right
engineer has to
question.
do that, everyone's going to have that problem. So making sure it's very collaborative. It's just like
Right.
it's a whole new environment that we have to be mindful of. And the better your environment is, just like a really good dev environment is engineers are going to be more productive. Having a really good AI tooling environment is going to make the tooling work better.
Well, let's touch on the next point here that, there's a change in the workflow of how work got done before and how it will get done today, and then what it will look like in the future. One of the commentaries is the creator of Claude Code runs 5 terminals with agents, 5 to 10 browser tabs, agents running, notifications when they finish. Your whole team's running that way, right? Of course they
Absolutely.
are. Absolutely they are. So how are you helping them in this journey? Is that really the goal? Do we expect UX people running that way? What is your thoughts about what this actually looks like?
I think it's the biggest thing is you have to find what works for you. I just like coding today. Well, everyone, like every engineer codes a little bit different. They have a different workflow. I don't think this is too much different either. And also the work you're doing, it makes a huge difference too, right? If
Mhm.
you're building a new application from scratch versus like you're doing feature fixes or bug fixes for a more complex system. At the end of the day, like it's one of the toughest problems in engineering, right? Is every problem is different
Yep.
and it's always hard, and some problem could be very simple and require a few lines of code, another one could require thousands of lines of code. So I think like at the end of the day, like you got to find out what works for you. So for example, what I kind of mean by that is like maybe like I'm very familiar with the code base and there's a bug. I know where that bug is. I know what I have to go fix. Could I just have an agent go and fix it for me? Sure. But that agent is going to do a bunch of lookups, is going to look at my
Right.
code, is going to do a whole bunch of different things. Whereas I can just go quickly make that code change, right?
Mhm.
So then that might be a case where that isn't going to work for you. But then I guess it's a very simple example, and I'm leaving out a lot of different things because an agent could do a lot of other things for you, like check the security and
Right.
check other parts in the code base to see if that is going to affect anything else. So but anyways, what I can imagine is that maybe you have a task where you are still doing the coding, you're using your agents to do some refactoring or whatever, but then at the same time you have another agent in the background doing some work for you. Maybe it's some research work even. Maybe it's not actually writing code. It's just giving you information for the next task you're going to take on. And then it's just about going back to it and checking in on it every now and then. But that kind of introduces a different problem, and I think that's like a whole nother skill set that's going to come into play. is context switching.
Yeah.
Like context switching has always been a bane of an engineer because you have to go and reorient yourself to this different task, and maybe you're in a different code base. So I think that is going to present some challenges. And I think like the person who can maybe run 5 agents um, is maybe really nailing that context switching. Or maybe they're running 5 agents that are working on a similar task or similar code base or something, so that the context switching isn't as high. So there's just like new skill sets that I think that are going to come up with all these different tools and how they work.
Absolutely. Shifting over to measuring, these tools aren't free.
Mhm.
So someone is knocking on your door saying, "Dude, Trevor, why is your team spending so much money?" And you're going to have a response, which is, "Of course, it's going to make us faster." When you have these conversations, how are you thinking about it? If you had the perfect answers to all the questions, what would they tell you? As a side note, I was recently at a conference, and the measurement tool measuring AI impact was additional lines of code produced per developer. And all I could do was like,
Ugh, it hurts to hear
"Thank you."
that. Yeah, I mean, it is, it's another layer onto a problem I don't even think is solved today. And again, measuring developer productivity, what does that even look like, right? And I think it's so different between, again, it's just back to like engineering work is just so different between people, right? So
Right, right,
trying to measure it is just kind of generally a lost cause in most time. I know there's some people that believe strongly in that and that you can really do good measurement. I believe in trying to collect as much data as possible always, to look for signals more than anything, to direct me in areas where I should focus my attention, not necessarily to immediately identify a problem or anything like that.
right.
Now, when it comes to the AI tools and like things that I would love to measure is like the quality of the code that is being generated
Mhm.
from these agents. Like, are we actually generating worse code? Are we making our system less maintainable? Are AI agents going to have a harder time maintaining our code down the road because of stuff they did, right? Creating too
Mhm.
much duplication, or again, us not working with the tools in a way that generates the code that we would want to have. I think that's one thing I wanted to kind of throw out there. And I've said to many people is like, make sure that it generates a code that you would write. If
Yeah.
you look at that and you're like, that's something I would have wrote, that's perfect. Then
Yep.
you should have some confidence in that, right? But also too, just with again the evolution of the tools and just to the like, we want to know where we do believe it is making us faster, because a lot of the time some of this is on gut reaction too, right? Oh well, I got 3 tasks done today, 3 of them were done in the background while I was doing something else. And again, how do we know that how far ahead did that really get you? Because you were spending a bunch of time context switching with those tools and that kind
Yep.
of stuff. And if you maybe just focused on one task, maybe you could have got that task done in a half hour, and then the next one in an hour, and next one in an hour. But instead you spent 5 hours messing with multiple agents and that kind of stuff. So that doesn't necessarily is a shot at the tools. It's maybe again like at the environment that you have. You're not providing that right context. You're not having
Mhm.
that right tooling in there, and that kind of, and again, not learning from each other and building up that knowledge, right? So yeah, that would be a big one. So how many agents can someone manage, right? Like, where does the context switching start to break down? I think that would be another big one. And then I would also like to even know, going back to how so much work is different, where these tools excel more than other places, right? Like
Yep.
fixing specific bugs, are they better at that? Building new features, are they better at that? Yeah, I don't know. I think there's just like so many things I would love to capture. And I think really the tough part about all this today is that, and I'm always on the hunt for better tools to try to get more data and everything, but it's just that it's hard to correlate it with what you're shipping today, right? I don't know what you use to generate, what code is and isn't generated. Sure, I can look at the code and I can definitely make some assumptions because of how something might have been written. Looks like AI or that doesn't. But at the end of the day, we really don't know what code is being generated and what makes it into production. And again, is it good code? Is it bad code? Is it slowing down?
Mhm.
Is it making us faster? Because bad code's going to slow us down. Yeah, sure. Back to like, I did get 3 tasks done today, and maybe I would have got 1 task done, but 2 of those tasks had issues that I'm fixing on another day and spending
Yep.
time on, right? So
Yep. Yep.
again, the tools are there, they're awesome, but the more data we have, the more signals, because we want to find the best tools. We want to find the way to work with the tools. And then, any way we can measure that is better.
Well, and I've heard when it comes to productivity, there's really only the outliers are what's interesting. Which developer checked in nothing, and which developer checked in a 50,000 line PRs, right?
Yeah, well, exactly, right? And
So,
it's not even that too, is like, so if someone uses an AI tool to generate a proof of concept, right?
Mhm.
And they generate 20,000 lines of code that day, but they didn't actually ship any code that day, right?
Right.
So you look at the metrics on whatever Claude Code or Cursor, and you see like, whoa, this person generated so much code, right? But again, they were just messing around, building a proof of concept, where someone, this person generated 50 lines of code, but that 50 lines of code was two high impact tasks
Right.
that were causing the customer a lot of issues, and they resolved it pretty quickly, or whatever, right? So
Yeah. Or they checked in 100 lines of code, 50 of which were AI assisted. What's the impact there?
yeah,
The convolution of all this. I think that's why it's super important, whatever you're using to measure, it has to have some flexibility because the scenarios are so wide and varied. We're looking at sustaining, and we're looking at proof of concept and greenfield, and we're looking at refinements in production. What does this look like as you get going forward? To that point, recently we sponsored the latest Dora survey, and one of the findings that they had was sort of a dual point, that what they were seeing from the survey was that individual developer productivity was going up, but platform instability and overall throughput was flat, and platform instability was going down. This is back to your point of, well, what's the quality? You asked that question.
yeah,
So my question to you is, what's your advice to other engineering leaders to help manage this?
yeah.
I love the sigh, by the way.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a tough one, right?
Yeah.
Because
I translate the sigh to put words in your mouth is go slow, think long, and then proceed.
one thing that comes to mind to me is, and I love, is that my engineers do their best to keep us honest too, right?
Hmm.
And I've had engineers call this out, where they believe that, like, hey, this, we're experiencing these issues, not because, like, they don't just straight out say because someone, just vibe
Right.
coded it or dumped a bunch of AI into it, but
Right.
that
AI
they hint
spot.
at that, right? Like, there might have been a quality dip because of this, and it might have been related to someone was just not using the tool in the right way. And what is the right way? What's not the right way? One thing that I don't think too many people would argue with on me with this is understanding and reviewing that code, right? So
Mhm.
at the end of the day, if you write the code or someone else writes the code, if you're not understanding that code, to me, the difference is there's no difference.
Right.
Like, you're going to create the same issue one way or the other. Now, if you're creating more issues, and this is correlated with a higher AI usage, like, the signal to me is engineers are not reviewing the code close enough.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that. I know we're getting to the end of our time here, but Dora also talked about how code review time went from 10% to 25%. At all stacks, it's more. I mean, it's a lot of time
Yeah.
and did our development teams know that part of their job now, a significant part of their job is now reviewing all this code? What are you thinking about the trade-off, and how are you presenting that in your teams? And what's the culture shift? What's the workflow shift? Where does talk about code review time and reviewing PRs and the rest of that?
Yeah, so I like the first thing that I knowing not knowing the full details of it, but if that involves, PR review time or also time you're reviewing code that an AI agent generates, I'm going to go on assumption that it's just like PR review code time maybe. And I'm going to say that my gut is telling me that the PRs are probably too big, that they're generating too much code with AI to the point where you're having these much longer review cycles. Now, no doubt about it, yeah, absolutely. You are going to be doing way more reviewing because, ideally you are pushing more code now
Right,
because you can generate it faster.
right.
So
You
there is
can.
going to be more PRs. There is going to be more reviewing. And it's another skill set, and it's going to be like one skill set that no doubt I think is going to set apart engineers is how good you can review code. Uh,
Yep.
but again, like I think it just comes back to the culture piece of it and the mindset. I definitely recall this. I always think about this is that one of my engineers, he always used to say like light reading alert when he would dump a huge PR on us with sirens and everything. And I've seen that too many times with AI generated code today. And it's so easy because you get into this flow of you build a plan, you're going through all the steps, and I could just nail it. And sometimes it takes some restraint to say, hey, this is a good stopping point. I need to get this out there. I need to get some reviews. So again, I think we're still learning the way to work with everything. And it's like having maybe more agents generate more smaller PRs instead of like having one that generates a big one or uh, so I mean, let's maybe talk again in a year about this and maybe we'll have a better answer.
Well, this has been a fantastic time. Trevor, we have a lot of topics we didn't get a chance to cover today, but I want to thank you for your time. For those folks that are also engineering leaders that want to understand some of the successes and failures and get some of your insights, how do people get a hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Trevor Herr. Again, I'm working at Syndio, so it shouldn't be able to find me not too hard. You can also find me on X at Trevor Herr. So that's Trevor Herr.
Fantastic. Trevor, thanks for the time. My name is Jeff Keyes. This has been another Stack Sessions. Trevor, looking forward to talking with you again. We'll continue the conversation about team dynamics and building AI products while using AI tools and efficiency. We got a lot more to talk about, so I'm looking forward to the next time. Again, until next time, my name is Jeff Keyes. Thanks, Trevor. See you soon.
Thanks, Jeff.